So guys, today's video is Rant 2 of 3. We talked about the Crucible the other day, which I feel like we have a lot of expertise in terms of experience, what the Sandbox does, how it feels. But the Crucible rant pretty much just boiled down to no incentive in both comp, Crucible Labs, and regular quick play. Today's video though is on vendors, most notably Eververse, our main vendors like Shax, Zavala, and the Gunsmith. And we're also going to talk about faction rallies a little bit, even though I think that's just a dead discussion. So Shadowkeep launches, we were expecting a vendor refresh. We did not get it. And I always assumed that the vendor refresh for Shax, Zavala, and the Gunsmith was almost like a given, right? At least annually, we should see some new weapons rotate into those vendors. Now, granted, we have other weapons. We've got Vex Offensive, we've got the raid weapons, we've got the dungeon weapons. Yes, there are other activities that do provide weapons, but most of those are a little more difficult for the average solo player to obtain. On top of that, just in general, all of these tokens that we have that we go and turn in, and I know many of us have thousands upon thousands just sitting in our inventory, really just gives us garbage. Like, there's nothing to look forward to in terms of weapon rolls, because pretty much all of these weapons, if you don't have a god roll for one of them, you probably don't care at this point. You've been looking at the same things forever now. I've only seen 1,000,000 Nightshades, a ton of Wishbringers. I got 5 or 6 rolls of Redrix, and I'm probably on the end of the spectrum that hoards entirely too much. My vault is slammed full of things because I'm waiting for an individual sandbox for each one of these. I've got like 30 sidearms that are just ready for the next sidearm meta. Is it ever gonna happen? Probably not, but I'm waiting. Most players though, they look at the weapon, they see that it's not a god roll, they don't care about future sandboxes, and they get rid of it, which is completely understandable. You want to live clutter-free in your life, I respect that. And I don't even think the Destiny community is asking for a lot. I think many people would have been fine with year 1 weapons coming back randomly roll. And we're not asking for all of them, just a couple. You could have added them season by season, but something to say, ooh, what's that? Oh yeah, I remember that gun. Thus resulting in you probably checking it out, getting some playtime with it, and experimenting with whatever roll you obtain, which may result in you playing longer to go after a potential god roll. At this point, everyone's just holding their tokens. Not only that, turning in all of these tokens, I've yet to see a single armor piece that is 60 plus. Now I know like in-game stuff is what's supposed to give 60 plus armor, but I was under the impression, or at least I hoped, that after turning in 4,000 or 5,000 tokens at one of these vendors, that maybe one piece of armor, just one, would come out 60 plus. So what the vendors have actually been for me this season and this expansion has just been a shard converter. That's all it is. I give them tokens and they give me shards. So again, similar to like resetting your Valor the other day, there's just no excitement whatsoever when you turn in these tokens. Matter of fact, it's kind of a burden to go and turn in all of these tokens because you're just going to be sitting there turning things in and deleting for the rest of the afternoon. And that's all I do. I just turn things in until I get the message that my postmaster is full, and then I'm like, okay, I'm going to my postmaster to delete pretty much all of these items. Now, despite the lack of vendor refresh, the vendor that does not lack any content is, of course, Eververse. Eververse has had more stuff in it this season than I have ever seen. Every time I turn around, I've got eye candy looking at me, left and right, and that big blue button, buy silver now, is constantly staring at me. Matter of fact, when you go into your menu, there's actually a store menu. So now you don't even have to go to the tower to access Eververse and buy silver. You can be in the middle of Neptune and you can still access Eververse. Eververse has rubbed me wrong greatly in this season. And we mentioned it the other day that Bungie needs to make money. We want Bungie to make money simply because we want Destiny to be profitable. We want more money put into the game. All those good things. The problem is based on what we've seen this season. The money that is being put back into the game seems to be more allocated to Eververse. So instead of taking all this Eververse money and being like, hey, look, Destiny community, we know you've been complaining about peer-to-peer servers. Let's give you some dedicated servers. Oh my God, I think everyone would erupt in cheers. We would take a national holiday. The world would come to a halt. And I know I'm sounding super dramatic right now, but it would be amazing to hear that. Instead, what we see though is, hey, we just made all this money with Eververse. Here's more Eververse stuff. Here's another season pass. And as of right now, guys, we have 27 days left of the season, which means in those final 2 to 3 weeks there, players that are not max rank on their season pass can purchase their way to 100, which is going to bring a whole nother rub all on its own. But just looking at Eververse, it is the most updated vendor. It is constantly getting new items, and based on action, because that's what I like to base things on, Bungie seems to be keeping that as priority number 1 above all things. So Paul Tassi actually threw an article together the other day. He talked about the Bright Dust economy, Festival of the Lost, the skins and items associated with it, and how much everything costs. He said it's $15 for individual armor sets, $40 for a silver bundle that would get you all 3 classes, $10 to $15 for ships or ghosts or sparrows or ornaments, and he said many of which cannot be earned with Bright Dust ever. Now, Bright Dust was like the currency that went side by side with silver in the previous seasons and expansions of Destiny. If you wanted the ornament or a specific item on day 1, you had to buy silver. But if you wanted to wait for that item to be thrown in rotation for our Bright Dust economy, then you can purchase it with Bright Dust. And Bright Dust was essentially currency given to you for playing the game. You played the game, you turned in the Ingrams associated with Eververse, you broke down those items, and you got Bright Dust. And then you turned that Bright Dust over to Eververse if you wanted to buy whatever it was that was in rotation. Normally it was never day 1 items, which was okay with us. I really never complained once for like all of Forsaken in the past year about Eververse and its Bright Dust economy. And I still spent money on silver, and I felt like it was a fair deal. I bought a number of ornaments day 1 simply because I just wanted to look sexy right at the get-go, and then some ornaments that were, kind of good. Not super sexy, but not bad. I would just wait for whenever it was going to be sold for Bright Dust. Bungie has thus moved away from this completely. Number 1, when you break down items, you don't get Bright Dust. You just get legendary shards. So you can still buy items with Bright Dust as of now, but it's a finite currency that you will eventually run out of. Now, some players have hoarded a bunch. I think I've got like 50,000 Bright Dust. I'm saving it though. Either way it goes, the system this season, because I did spend like $50 or $60 on silver, I spent that money and then I went and bought a bunch of ornaments. 1, everything is extremely expensive. Like, I don't even remember it being this expensive. Maybe it was, but now that it's outlined in front of us that, hey, you pretty much are only going to get these ornaments through silver as of now, the system just seems unfair. And as I'm buying it, as soon as I finished buying, I was like, you know what? I don't think I'm gonna buy anything else from Eververse ever again. Like, even though these items are super sexy, as a veteran player, I'm feeling like I'm getting screwed here, which is why the entire Eververse deal is such a bad rap for veteran players, or even players that even purchase the expansion. I would have rather this season have launched with 2 separate economies, maybe even 2 separate stores. One economy being for new light players, where if you are a new light player and you want to buy some of these skins, you can. And since Paul Tassi brought it up, the prices for the skins are pretty much matching that of Fortnite's, maybe a little less, but it's not like Bungie's just like price gouging us in comparison to other games. Now, granted, Destiny is only like half a free game. Like, I know we're jumping up and we're saying, hey, Destiny 2 is free to play. Yes, it is, but only a portion of it, which leaves the rest of us that have spent money on an expansion or been a day 1 player being screwed by the current system. If we had an economy that was different for veteran players or people that have bought the expansion that allowed us to obtain currency in the game, maybe it's Bright Dust, maybe it's something new, it doesn't matter, but something that we can obtain in game to purchase these items, that would be a much fair system. Now, that's not to say there's not going to be players out there that are veteran players that are like, you know what? I want this black spindle ornament today. I'm not waiting tomorrow. I want my gun to look super horny. We're doing it now. And Bungie can provide that option. But I felt like the previous system with Bright Dust, having items rotate into that economy, was fair to veteran players. I honestly think it could be better though, but there needs to be a change because as of right now, Bungie, my wallet is drying up. Yes, I can pay for more silver, but I'm not wanting to. I'm feeling screwed. And if I'm a content creator that feels that way, that makes videos on these guns, I'm almost certain that a lot of other players feel this way. So that's the way I look at it, guys. Eververse should have 2 different economies, one separate from the other, one specifically gauged at those free-to-play players, the other gauged at the veteran players that will allow us to obtain items in-game. And whether that's the Bright Dust currency or legendary shard cards or something, anything. Something, though, that separates itself, that rewards the players that have paid for this game for years now. Now, moving on to the final subject at hand, as it involves vendor refreshes, faction rallies. People always bring up faction rallies. I always get a couple comments of folks pretty much upset. Guys, I don't really know what to say about faction rallies. It's been one of those things that's been a hiatus for like ever. It's like Trials. Trials got a glimmer of hope this season simply because we have elimination back. So I can speculate and say, hey, I think Trials could potentially come back. Faction rallies, though, I really don't have any glimmer of hope there, as I've seen nothing that is reflecting a possible return of those things. At this point, though, I would actually be okay with faction rally weapons just returning to the loot pool. Maybe even do it season by season. Add like 1 or 2 weapons. Allow them to return with some random rolls, maybe even sprinkle some new perks in them to give them a little more value over other weapons, and just throw them in, like with the gunsmith or something. I know it doesn't make a lot of sense lore-wise, but I don't think anyone would care. Some of those weapons actually had very good gun models. I was very much a big fan of the Maxim Sniper back in year 1. Imagine it returning with random rolls, and just have it thrown in with one of the vendors. So guys, that is my thoughts overall on this season, Eververse, the vendors, and the lack of them. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
Slap that like button like your mama told you right.